My name is Nick Cowell, and I'm the CEO of the Gibraltar Blockchain Exchange. And I'm here today to talk to you about Traceto. Traceto is an ICO that's been approved for launch by GBX, and I'm absolutely honoured, and I have the pleasure of introducing CK, who is the MD of Synopsys, as well as being the CEO of Traceto. And funny enough, we've just been going down memory lane on our way here to the video shoot, and we found that actually we worked in the same bank many years ago, a bank called ING Bearings, and we overlapped at the same time. So it's a small world. And not only that, we also back in February, GBX completed its sale of its own token, the ROC token, and we used Synopsys for our whitelisting in terms of KYC and AML. So having been on a journey together, working professionally, we've actually just found out personally that we were probably in the same trading room a number of times 13 or 14 years ago, when I say looked a lot younger and CK probably looked exactly as he does now. And but we're really excited about this conversation we're about to have, and we're going to ask some questions and get to know Synopsys and Traceto a little bit better. But I'm going to hand over to CK. CK, tell us about Synopsys, the origins, Traceto, and where you are.
Okay, right, thank you. Thanks, Nick. Hello, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with Nick as well as with the audience here. Now, the evolution of what we're doing today with Traceto itself dates back to how Synopsys was founded back in 2014, where we were trying to automate and digitize and make compliance easier for everybody, particularly focusing on, or we were trying to focus on the larger institution, because there has been a lot of pain points, and like you mentioned, we worked in the same companies or same banks before, so we started with that vision, but we were quite quick to realize that it's actually not as easy to try and penetrate the large organizations, and so we pivoted quite quickly to build software as a service, off-the-shelf products, and we target the smaller tier market or the smaller tier participants. And when we started looking at anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism financing, and the likes of know your customers, KYC, AML, CTF in short for these terms, which I'm going to use quite a fair bit throughout this session, we realized that actually the smaller players are the ones that need a lot of our services as opposed to the larger ones. And from a startup perspective, we needed a way to generate revenue and sales as quickly as possible, because we were bootstrapped, we weren't funded by any VCs or anyone, so we needed to make sure that we hit the road and be able to build and finish the product and sell and get paid for the services that we do. So that went on for a couple of years with Synopsys, and Synopsys now has about between 450 to 500 clients, all B2B clients in both the financial services space, which include your fund managers, your financial advisors, remittance companies, insurance companies, quite a number of them as well, and fintech companies, right? So the fintech hype came up in 2015-16 period, so we managed to caught on with that, and we do have quite a number of fintech clients in that space. Robo-advisors, platforms, payment services, as well as some remittance companies there. So from there, we started to get into some clients in the blockchain space, cryptocurrencies, and one of the very first cryptocurrency client that we have is GBX, where they started there. They had one of the first to do their ICO here in Singapore. So almost back in 2015, 2016 time, so we started with that. And the whole thing about the cryptocurrency came about really towards second half of last year, where we started to get a lot of tractions, with Carbon Network, decentralized exchange, as well as GBX and many others. Right? So it's all the quite a number of the recent ICOs, the bigger ones, even in Korea and some other locations, are using our service as well. So that then made me think about, okay, whilst I can sell the software to each of the ICO and make that multiple times of revenue, why don't I actually create a KYC utility platform to benefit the ecosystem? Because I have this vision to promote regulatory inclusion. And a lot of people talk about financial inclusion, but that's one part of it, because I'm not providing financial service. I'm actually providing regulatory service. So then that term came about. What do you mean by regulatory inclusion? So I want to make sure that because cryptocurrency community are operating very much without too much regulation, too much rules around them. But a number of them that came to us for our service at Synopsis I kind of realized that they actually want to be on the right side of the fence. They want to do the right thing. They want to be able to sleep better at night, and as they have finished or go through their ICOs, and this is where we can help. So, even though they are not legally, regulatorily obliged to do this, most of them actually come and want to do the right thing. So
best practices, yeah.
Best practice, right? So I coined that in a sense of it's almost like a regulatory inclusion, voluntarily, which is a good thing for the ecosystem to become more mature. And on the flip side is also that if this is an ecosystem whereby it's made up of the end users like the you and I, and it's also made up of participants, service providers like the exchanges, the wallets, and the ICOs. And then you have the regulators as another potential participants in the ecosystem because they want to regulate. So all these come together as an ecosystem, which the fundamental for the success of any ecosystem is that it must have got some boundaries that you can operate within, and then that's where I term it as regulatory inclusion. So where everybody's standards gets leveled up, then that's where you, from a regulatory perspective, that's where you can actually operate better, or the business can operate better without actually having this baggage of regulatory burden at the back of the business that you're trying to drive.
Yes, I mean a lot of the values that you're talking about, ring very, dearly with exactly what GBX set out to achieve, which is best practices, disclosure, transparency, and investor protection, etc. But also getting the regulators more comfortable with this emerging market where there's still a lot of, I think, nervousness globally. So
I think the nervousness globally is multiple folds, right? Because and I'm not gonna be very specific about which country, but particularly as with a new technology that have emerged, and then the reality is that blockchain technology hasn't been around that long, as well as it's not that new after all, right? And people are thinking of, okay, can we split blockchain technology with cryptocurrency? And my personal view is that if you take away the monetary value of it, then how do you actually incentivize people to innovate?
That's right.
So I don't think that's going to be possible, across the world in a standardized fashion. So and I look at the cryptocurrency people, as in the startups and the ICO that's coming through, and the ideas that's coming through. It's fantastic ideas, right? So without these dreams and without these ideas trying to potentially create a better world for everyone, some will succeed, some will not.
That's right.
Right? Some are a little bit more far-fetched than others. Some are a little bit more realistic. But without even trying, then we're just going to remain as status quo. And status quo is not necessarily the best thing for us in the future. So what I'm saying is that with cryptocurrency being an emerging or potential asset class, over the last year or so, we've heard of some of the bigger banks having set up cryptocurrency trading desks, and I personally have also been inquired by some people about how do we go about setting up a crypto fund, how do we get more involved in this, and these are the traditional people that are not in this at all when you talk about last year or the year before. So my take is that if cryptocurrency is going to be an asset class that's here to stay, and more people are going to come through, and therefore there is an absolute need to, I would say, future-proof by having best practices and having some kind of a regulatory best practices standards that we can draw from our experiences in the real world bank FIs that we've been through for decades, and draw these practices and standards and apply that to the cryptocurrency space from AML CTF perspective or KYC, then that will be the way we should operate.
So CK, the white paper is published on the GBX website. You're approved for launch. Tell us a little about Traceto and the KYC platform.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier on, the vision of Traceto is actually to create an utility for all cryptocurrency participants. And by that, I don't mean just the end users themselves. Definitely that will be part of the ecosystem, because the ecosystem made up of the actual service providers, like the exchanges, the wallets, as well as other ICOs coming through. So one way to look at this is that we want to achieve some kind of a reusability of KYC, because none of us wants to, and as an individual user, we do not want to be KYC many times. It's a bit of a pain, right?
Yes.
So, but the reality of a KYC requirement is multiple folds, because if I break down what KYC really is, it encompasses a set of procedures that typically the onus is on the service providers to check their end users, because you and I as end user, we will not want to be KYC if I was given a choice, and realistically I wouldn't want to pay for it as well. So it's typically gonna be the owners and the responsibilities on the service providers to do their KYC bit, right? So that's one part of it. Now, which means that if I want to think about how do I reuse the KYC that is being performed, no other way to do this than a utility platform, right? So the end user, for example, if for GBX, if you come along with say 20,000 users, these will have to go through what we call our checks, which I'll explain a little bit later, and then they will be given a reputation score, and from there you can then decide whether these users up to a certain scores gets accepted for the service, and users that score badly because of some reasons, then those are not accepted until they rectify some of the issues that was encountered. Okay, so that is the high level idea, but more generally, if I were to look at KYC in specifics, what does it entail? Typically people think of KYC as, you need to get a copy of the passport or ID or driver's license, and that's it. But we kind of know from banking industry, we know that's not all. There's a heaps of other things that needs to be done. So, and I'm not trying to do everything all at the same time, because AML CTF at the moment is actually the biggest pain point. If you look at our white paper, we define KYC very broadly as AML CTF as one part. Potentially the customer segmentation, the product suitability will be another aspect, as well as creditworthiness, depending on the innovation that will potentially come through in the future in the crypto space, where people may start to do certain margin facilities or lending facilities or borrowings and all that, underlying with cryptocurrency as a class, and therefore you definitely will need to be looking at creditworthiness of some form. So which means that if all that is brought together, and that's really how you demonstrate that you've actually carried out the due diligence and you actually know your customers, right? So fundamentally that. Then if I look at it slightly differently, what we're trying to achieve is we're trying to answer 4 fundamental questions here in Traceto on KYC. The first one being who you are, right? Your ID or your stuff. You say you're Nick, and so prove that you're Nick.
Yep.
And then we're going to use some technologies as well, facial recognition, video recognitions, and OCRs and the like. So it's kind of straightforward there. Second question, who you're not, right? Typically what banks will do, and you have a team of people to do that, which is basically to punch in your name into some screening databases and check that this person is he a politically exposed person, perhaps in short? Is he on the terrorist list, sanction names, having adverse media? Now this process is already automated by us, right? Within Synopsys as well as Traceto. So that is the second question, can be answered, right? But the work that needs to be done have to be automated to make it a lot easier. Then the third question on KYC is, are you still who you say you are? Because you say you're Nick today, and then what if...
So it's ongoing.
Yeah, it's an ongoing due diligence, which a lot of people miss because KYC can never just be at the onboarding point.
No.
It has to be ongoing. You have to continuously prove your that you've done your due diligence, but you don't have to do it every single day. You have to do it in a periodic manner. Now, so that's where the third question needs to be answered. And the fourth question is what did you do? By opening an account with, say, GBX or with any other exchange or anything like that, or wallets, if you don't do anything, there's nothing to talk about AML, strictly speaking, right? So it's only when you start to do something, which is what did you do, then your transaction comes in. And as with all international AML CTF standards, there are two parts to this. One is pre-transaction, which is onboarding controls, which is preventive. The second part of the control will be detective. So that's where your transaction monitoring comes in, which is what Traceto will work with exchanges like GBX to be able to and use machine learning to be able to detect unusual patterns of large transaction or unusual transaction that doesn't accord with the risk assessed against the particular customer or the user, and to be able to do our part, to potentially report suspicious transaction to the relevant authorities, because this is by far the fundamentally most basic aspect of KYC. So, and we think that by answering the 4 questions progressively over time, it will put everybody in a better position. The exchange, the wallets operators, and even the ICOs themselves, who may become an exchange or a wallet if that's their business. And the users will also be leveled up because they will also be, because of the way we want to do it, there will be a reputation score. We want to be able to utilize the users themselves to eventually potential or partially perform some kind of a community verification task, right, themselves. So I'll talk about it later on the utilization of the tokens bit, but that part will mean that everybody has a role to play, right? So because, for example, if you're a user, you've got a wallet, but you let someone else use your wallet for whatever reasons that you do not know, then strictly speaking, that may akin to you being a money mule.
Yes. In
the real world sense, right? So you don't lend your bank account to somebody else to operate, because if you are caught doing that, potentially the law of the crime of abetment kicks in. And most countries will have this similar requirement, because every location or every jurisdiction's law on anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism financing comes down from Financial Action Task Force, FATF in short, the 40 recommendations.
Yeah.
And that's really what needs to be looked at. So at Traceto, we want to look at it more holistically. So we're looking at the international standards, what is required, generally speaking, and then we answer these 4 questions, which I think people understand what they mean.
Yes, very
but
much
when
so.
you throw the AML rules at them, they probably don't understand what it means.
Yes.
So we're filtering it and make it simpler for people to grasp the idea.
I think it's fantastic, because if you look at a company like ours, GBX, we have ICO issuers coming through,
right?
But then we also have account openers who are coming on board to either participate in that token sale or just generally open an account.
Yes.
And one of the biggest, I think, challenges for a company like ours, but also for example, our regulator, is do we know the people who are opening the account?
Yes.
And also, can we monitor those people on an ongoing basis?
Yes.
They've raised it several times in the past. Ongoing compliance.
Yes.
And it just sounds like everything that you are, trying to implement and offering is, for strategically for an organisation like ours, it de-risks the entire, business. That obviously is such a massive concern.
It has to be, because I mean you can obviously. I mean, I look at the AML requirements around the region or around the world as well. It's very, very standard. It's fairly similar across all, because everybody tries to map their laws and their requirement to the FATF standards. Because FATF or FATF conducts periodic mutual evaluations of countries themselves, right? So they will look at Singapore, Hong Kong, wherever. So every locations gets member countries gets audited by Financial Action Task Force. They need to set their laws and their enforcements and implementation of these requirements in accordance to the.
In order to comply.
Yeah, in order to comply, because otherwise, no countries or no member countries will want to get a bad rating from FATF. Full stop. And FATF has also published certain guidelines, requirements on cryptocurrency, virtual currencies over the last couple of years. So we try to map that and allow our users to or our clients to be able to comply with their standards.
Great. So CK, you've given us a fantastic overview of the processes that you're looking to put into place. Can we talk a little bit about the token itself, the tokenomics, the utility, the size of the deal, pre, public, etc.?
Okay. So basically, we're creating 1 billion units of T2T, or that's in terms of the numbers, priced at 10 cent US dollar per T2T. Now, the way it works is that we are putting up $30 million worth of token for sale, so that equates to 300 million T2T tokens. So from that $30 million worth of tokens, 24 million was allocated to private sale, 6 million to the public sale. So 24 million private sale has been fully subscribed. In fact, we were oversubscribed, and that ran from 9 of February to 7 of March, and now we're looking to launch and to do the public round through GBX by way of an initial exchange offering, 6 million. Now, and in terms of the split of, we talk about the 30% of the 1 billion token being for the sale. The remaining will be split in this manner. So 25% will be amongst the founders as well as the advisors.
Yes.
And then there will be a lockup period over 2-year cycle. And there's another 30% that will be for reserves, companies reserve, which we will need to work out what we will do with that in the longer term.
In the future, yes.
In the future, because I think as with all prudent planning of any company, we need to have some budget for the future, which we may not be aware what we want to do with it at this present moment, right? Now then the other 15% will be for marketing, for legal, for administrative work, so that sort of make up the entire amount. Okay, if I focus on the utility of the T2T token itself, what we want to do, or as I've mentioned earlier on, is that because Traceto is a B2B model business, so that means we primarily service the exchange, the wallets, as well as the ICO company coming into the ecosystem. So there will be an element or aspect of payment for the T2T service, for Traceto service using T2T by, say, for example, GBX or any other service providers that use our service. Now that's one aspect of it, right? Now the second aspect of it is that because, as I said earlier on, we also want to utilize the community, that means the end users themselves, in a more meaningful way, rather than just being a user of, let's say, an exchange service or participate in ICO. What we want to do is that we want to be able to create a concept of community verifiers, whereby say for example, if you're a community verifier and you can actually perform some assigned task on social reputation verification for the ecosystem, and then you can actually earn T2T tokens by doing so. So it's like, KYC is not just about, like I said, although we have the 4 questions to answer, we want to bring in this concept of what happens about, if you are perfectly fine or legitimate on who you are, who you're not, and all that. But what if you have got a very, very bad reputation on social media? What if you do things on social media that is less than good, for example? I'm not sure what these are, but in terms of whether there is an element of that we can add to create a more holistic KYC than just ticking 1, 2, 3 boxes from a regulatory requirement, because we know that regulation is going to go one way, right? It's just going to keep becoming more stringent over time. So by just meeting the minimum standard without thinking that how people's, if you spend your life more on a digital platform than anything else, then surely that aspect of the digital life have to be accounted for because you're operating in the virtual world as well. So we need that part to come in as well to get into the formula. Now, so which means that if we do that, the community verification we cannot have a centralized team of people within Traceto to do all that, right? So that's where I think decentralization and by being more inclusive from a regulatory perspective should then extend to the end users themselves. So if they were to be able to perform some tasks and we pay them a certain amount of T2T tokens, then they get involved, right? Involving the community is what we want to do.
Yes.
And before they can actually carry out the task, we need some skin in the game, which means that they will use T2T token and put a stake in there. And if they do the good job, and then they get paid for it, for example, and if they do a bad job, then part of the staken token will be deducted. I mean, that's the concept. And another thing we want to do with the token is that, as I said, because we want to create an ecosystem whereby everybody gets involved in KYC, although most people don't want to do it. So we want to create a concept of a gamification of KYC to literally create a game within the ecosystem whereby end users themselves can play and they can get engaged. But by playing a game, we also want to at the same time impart some knowledge about AML, KYC, some scenarios, testings and all that. It's almost like the usual AML training that the banks will conduct. Albeit maybe those are a little bit less interesting.
Yes.
So what we try to do is if you create a game and at the same time you impart the knowledge, so you kind of level up the knowledge, not just ticking the box on the regulatory requirement, you actually pass on the knowledge and the awareness of this requirement, which is important requirement to everybody in the ecosystem. That when they level up in the game itself, to maybe from novice to master or whatever, then they get to perform that community verification task. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's a process to get through, but I don't think it's going to be very easy. But I think this is ultimately the vision where, if you want to have a self-sustaining ecosystem, it's not just having a centralized company doing that. You need to involve everybody down the track, because the responsibility on AML KYC, or sorry, not AML KYC, AML CTF itself actually rests with all of us.
Yes.
It's not just the service provider doing it. Yes, they have an additional regulatory.
But there's a huge knowledge base out there, effectively.
There's a huge knowledge base. There's a huge pool of users, who can actually help in the process.
Yes.
So why don't we tap into that?
Yes. No, it makes a lot of sense.
I mean, decentralization doesn't have to mean or limited to just decentralization from a technology perspective.
I agree.
Yeah.
From a community perspective as well.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, everything's on the blockchain.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah. It will be on the blockchain, but of course we have to be quite careful that personal identifiable information, the PII, cannot be on chain, right? So there'll be a hash, and then we'll put in a concept of the multi-sig signatory approach to basically be able to unlock some of these things. And so the security aspects and all that will have to be taken care of as well. So we're looking at a few technologies to see how we can make sure this is foolproof, because we do not want to end up with some kind of hacking and things like that, which will dampen or jeopardize the reputation of everybody. So things like, how do you come to a conclusion? How do you come to a point whereby there could be like a zero knowledge proof? You can prove yourself without having knowledge about that person.
Yes.
What about like homomorphic encryption and some of these other techniques that has been researched upon quite a fair bit, but we want to be able to explore and see how that can be done from technology perspective. We don't think that we can hit nirvana in one step. It will probably need to make sure that we roll this out in achievable milestones, and to be able to add functions and features to the platform over time. The last thing we want to do is to reinvent wheels. If there are providers out there that I'm just using an example, that can do identity management better, and we think that why not? That can be plugged in here, because KYC is not just about one part. It's a holistic aspect, which if you try to acquire, let's say for example GBX, if you try to acquire every parts of this process, you're going to end up with 20 different providers.
That's right.
Which is what banks and the larger ones
Exactly.
might have spent their money on.
Yes.
Which is not going to work because everything is not going to be integrated together.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're trying to create a one-stop shop here, whereby we don't want to be overly centralized, but in some aspect where it relates to KYC practices, for a start, there will be some element of centralization, but you need to move from centralization. How do you move to the next side, the other side, which is decentralization? Will we get to a point where it's completely decentralized?
Yep.
I think it will take some time.
Yes.
It will not be immediate, and I stress that by decentralization does not necessarily have to mean or strictly be limited to just technologically decentralizing the process.
CK, that's been an absolutely fascinating insight. Thank you very much for all the work that you're doing. It's absolutely strategically vital for this ecosystem and community to mature. So absolutely wonderful. GBX users, if you want any more information, traceto.io is the website to go to. The white paper is on our website, as you've probably seen already. And you know, we wish you all the best. Thank you very much. CK, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much.